Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The intellectual history of the 20th century contains a handful of scientific communications whose spare prose and modest presentation conceal a profound reordering of human potential. These documents function as epistemological pivots, transforming a theoretical possibility into an empirical reality. Among this select group, the 1939 paper by Leo Szilard and Enrico Fermi, titled Neutron Production in Uranium, holds a unique and formidable position. Published in the Physical Review, its content, delivered with a serene objectivity characteristic of the discipline, provided the first substantive American experimental confirmation that the fission of uranium does indeed liberate multiple neutrons. This finding was the physical key required to unlock the conceptual door to a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction. An evaluation of this work demands a focus that mirrors its own direct, section-by-section analysis of its internal claims, its methodological architecture, and the crystalline logic that connects its experimental procedure to its world-altering conclusion. This essay will undertake such an evaluation, proceeding through the paper's argumentative structure to assess the specific claims and frameworks presented by its authors, thereby illuminating the precise nature of its contribution at the very moment of its inception. Section 1. The articulation of the central experimental question. The paper's introductory sentences establish its intellectual lineage and define its experimental purpose with an impressive economy of expression. Szilard and Fermi begin by situating their inquiry directly in the wake of the transformative discoveries of late 1938 and early 1939. They explicitly credit the work which demonstrated the splitting of uranium and thorium nuclei under neutron bombardment, a clear reference to the chemical evidence produced by Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann. They follow this by acknowledging the physical interpretation of this phenomenon as a fission process, a concept articulated by Lise Meitner and Otto Frisch, which posited the division of the uranium nucleus into two lighter fragments accompanied by a tremendous release of energy. The core claim of this opening section is one of scientific succession. The authors are presenting their work as the logical next step in a rapidly unfolding sequence of discoveries. Having accepted fission as a reality, the immediate, pressing question became whether this process was neutron-consuming or neutron-producing. The paper's stated aim, therefore, is to provide an answer. The argument is that if the Meitner-Frisch model is correct, and the resulting fission fragments are neutron-rich isotopes, these fragments would likely decay by emitting neutrons. The purpose of the experiment is therefore to search for these hypothesized secondary neutrons. This framing is a model of scientific reasoning, moving from established theory to a testable hypothesis. Its fundamental claim is that the existence of a nuclear chain reaction hinges on the answer to a single, empirically verifiable question: does the fission of a uranium nucleus by one neutron produce, on average, more than one new neutron? The introduction thus serves as a compact manifesto, declaring the experiment's intent to resolve the most critical uncertainty of the nascent atomic age. Section 2. The methodological framework and experimental apparatus. The second part of the paper describes the physical arrangement of the experiment, and in doing so, makes a powerful claim about methodological sufficiency. The authors outline a design of profound parsimony, a hallmark of Fermi's experimental style. The setup consisted of a primary neutron source, specifically a radon beryllium source, placed at the center of a large cylindrical tank of water. This source emits fast neutrons. The detector was a piece of rhodium foil, which becomes radioactive when it absorbs slow, or thermal, neutrons. This induced radioactivity in the rhodium foil, measurable by a Jida counter, serves as a proxy for the local density of thermal neutrons. The uranium, in the form of uranium oxide, could be placed in a layer surrounding the primary source. The large tank of water served a dual purpose, functioning as a moderator. It slowed down the fast neutrons from the radon beryllium source, making them more likely to be captured by either the rhodium detector or uranium nucleus. Crucially, it would also slow down any fast secondary neutrons that might be emitted from a fission event, thereby making them detectable by the same rhodium foil. The implicit claim embedded in this design is that this arrangement is capable of distinguishing a baseline neutron flux from an enhanced neutron flux. The logic is that the spatial distribution of thermal neutrons throughout the water tank would be altered by the presence of a new neutron source. By measuring the thermal neutron density at a specific radial distance from the center, first without and then with uranium, any observed increase in density could be attributed to neutrons produced by the uranium itself. The architecture is elegant because it uses the same medium, water, and the same detector, rhodium foil, to measure both the primary and potential secondary neutrons, simplifying the system and reducing potential sources of systematic error. It is a testament to the idea that a question of immense consequence can be addressed with apparatus that is, in its essence, straightforward and comprehend. Section 3. The Protocol of Comparative Measurement. The paper proceeds to detail the precise experimental procedure, a section that forwards the claim of a controlled and rigorous comparison. The core of the methodology was a direct A-B comparison. The rhodium detector was placed inside the water tank at a specific distance from the center. A measurement was taken by irradiating the foil for a set period, then quickly moving it to a shielded Geiger counter to measure its activity. This provided a baseline reading of the thermal neutron density at that location, resulting from the primary radon beryllium source alone. Then, the experiment was repeated under identical conditions of geometry and timing. With one single change, a layer of uranium oxide was placed around the primary neutron source. The rhodium foil's activity was measured again. The central claim of this protocol is that this comparative method effectively isolates the variable of interest, which is the effect of the uranium, by keeping the primary source strength, the water moderator, the detector position, and the irradiation and counting times constant. The authors argue that any observed difference in the rhodium's induced radioactivity must be due to processes occurring within the uranium. This is classical experimental design, aiming to nullify confounding variables through repetition and minimal change. The authors effectively contend that their procedure is robust enough to yield a meaningful result, attributing any delta in the measured radioactivity directly to the nuclear interactions within the uranium layer. The understated description of the procedure, moving the foil from the tank to the counter, belies the intellectual rigor of the experimental control being exercised. It asserts that the phenomenon in question, if it exists, will manifest as a simple, measurable difference between two meticulously managed scenari. Section 4. The presentation of the core empirical finding. This section of the paper presents the quantitative result, the empirical heart of the entire endeavour. After describing the comparative protocol, Szilard and Fermi state their finding with characteristic restraint. They report that the presence of the uranium oxide layer around the neutron source resulted in an increase in the measured radioactivity of the rhodium detector. The magnitude of this increase was specified as being approximately 10%. This is the paper's central empirical claim. It is a declaration that the experiment yielded a positive result. The 10% figure itself, while seemingly modest, was deeply significant. It was a clear, unambiguous signal above the statistical noise of the measurements. The claim is direct and unadorned. The uranium is producing neutrons. By placing a numerical value on the effect, the authors move the inquiry from the qualitative to the quantitative. They are asserting that the phenomenon is not only detectable but also measurable with their apparatus. The intellectual authority of the paper rests heavily on this single, clean number. The authors offer it without elaborate defense, implying that the rigor of their previously described method lends the result its validity. There is a certain irony in the placid presentation of this 10% figure, a number that confirmed the physical basis for a technology that would redefine global power. The claim is simple: the neutron flux is higher with uranium than without it, and the difference is measurable. This confirmation, however small the percentage, provided the concrete evidence that many in the physics community were anxiously looking. Section 5 Quantitative interpretation and the estimation of neutron yield. Following the presentation of their core result, the authors transition to its interpretation. Making their most significant theoretical claim, they confront the complex physics of the situation. The primary neutrons from the source are fast, and only a fraction of them, after being slowed by the water, will cause fission in the uranium-238 isotope, while others are captured by uranium-235. The secondary neutrons emitted from fission are also born fast. These must travel out of the uranium layer and be thermalized by the surrounding water to be detected by the rhodium foil. The authors acknowledge that a full, precise calculation of the number of neutrons produced per fission event would require detailed knowledge of various nuclear cross-sections and energy spectra, information that was largely unavailable at the time. Despite these limitations, they proceed to make an estimate. They reason that the observed 10% increase in the spatial density of thermal neutrons at a particular radius implies a larger increase in the total number of neutrons produced. By making some simplifying assumptions about the geometry and the average path length of neutrons, they arrive at an estimate for the number of secondary neutrons produced for each primary thermal neutron that is absorbed by the uranium. From this, they deduce the average number of neutrons liberated per fission event. The paper claims this value is of the order of 2. This is a monumental assertion. The critical threshold for a chain reaction is a yield greater than 1. By claiming a value of roughly 2, Szilard and Fermi are stating that for every 1 neutron consumed in a fission event, approximately 2 are created. This surpasses the break-even point substantially, accounting for inevitable losses of neutrons to non-fission capture and escape. This estimation, an exercise in what is sometimes called Fermi problem physics, provided the first working number for the parameter later designated as eta, the neutron yield. The claim was audacious given the uncertainties, yet it proved to be remarkably accurate. It was this number, too, that transformed the concept of a chain reaction from a remote possibility into a tangible engineering problem. Section 6 The concluding assertion on the possibility of a chain reaction. The paper culminates in a final, brief paragraph that articulates the ultimate implication of its findings. Having established an empirical effect and derived a quantitative estimate for neutron multiplication, Szilard and Fermi address the question that motivated the entire experiment. They state directly that their result, specifically the neutron yield per fission being greater than 1, indicates that the possibility of maintaining a chain reaction is a serious one. This is the paper's final and most consequential claim. However, it is a carefully qualified one. The authors exhibit immense scientific foresight and responsibility by immediately pointing out the primary obstacle. A chain reaction in a system composed of natural uranium and a moderator like water is contingent upon winning a competition. The newly produced fission neutrons must be thermalized and find another uranium nucleus to fission before they are lost. The chief mechanism for loss in their system was capture by the hydrogen nuclei in the water moderator. They conclude, therefore, that the establishment of a chain reaction depends on whether the parasitic absorption of neutrons by the moderator and other materials can be reduced to a level below the rate of neutron production from fission. This final claim is conditional and predictive. It asserts that a chain reaction is physically plausible but presents a specific technical challenge that must be overcome. In doing so, it effectively lays out the research program for the next several years of nuclear physics. The paper does not claim to have achieved a chain reaction. It claims to have demonstrated its fundamental physical viability and to have identified the central problem, neutron economy, that needed to be solved. This conclusion acts as both a summary of their achievement and a roadmap for the future, a future that was to arrive with astonishing speed. In conclusion, the 1939 paper on neutron production in uranium by Szilard and Enrico Fermi stands as a masterpiece of scientific communication, where each section builds upon the last with inexorable logic. The work's enduring power derives from the directness of its internal claims and the elegant austerity of the methods used to support them, from the clear articulation of its central question grounded in prior discovery. The paper moves to a description of a brilliantly simple experimental apparatus. It then details a controlled, comparative protocol whose results are presented as a single, decisive empirical finding. This finding is then subjected to a reasoned, albeit approximate, quantitative analysis, which yields the critical number that suggests a surplus of neutrons. The final conclusion, asserting the plausibility of a chain reaction while simultaneously defining the principal obstacle of neutron absorption, demonstrates a mature and comprehensive understanding of the problem. The paper's claims were not of absolute certainty or high precision. They were claims of existence, of magnitude, and of profound possibility. By systematically verifying each necessary link in the logical chain, from neutron emission to a potential cell-sustaining reaction, Szilard and Fermi provided the essential empirical bedrock upon which the entire structure of the Manhattan Project would soon be built. Their work was a quiet announcement, couched in the cautious language of physics, that humanity had acquired a new and formidable form of fire.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.